Hello everybody, it is me, Game Penguin Tree 1, and today, that's right, we're doing it. It's a Harman week. Yeah. So overall, what has happened with Harman Smith? Well, there's going to be a few videos on Harman that I kind of bring up, at least throughout these next couple of weeks, but this is going to be specifically for Harman Week. This involves Harman Smith, the Nintendo fanboy that I continuously talk about because he's a recurring character on this channel. But what happened this time? Well, the general timeline of events that I'm going to be following here, and it inquires about him making a video on the Steam Deck and how the numbers were quote-unquote for damage control for the failure of the Steam Deck. Joe then makes a video on it, then Icon Era decides to try it back up. Not Joe, but Harman Smith, because, you know, they don't like PC gaming and they called him a failure, and then Joe makes a video on that. Overall, Joe has thrown his hat into the ring, and I kind of want to ride the coattails off it at least a little bit, as well as give my own opinion, obviously, because I cover Harman Smith a lot as well, and I don't really have anything else to really talk about this week, because news is getting a bit slow. So, you know, scraping that bottom of the barrel and, you know, eating the wood chips sounded like a good idea at the time. But the video is already being made, so let's just get started on this. So we're going to start off with the first video that actually kind of kicked off this whole thing, and then we're going to get into the Icon Era post after the fact. Now, again, I will mostly be talking about Harman Smith in this video, but Harman Smith being referenced by Icon Era isn't the weirdest thing, as they have also referenced or quote-unquote talked about other reliable sources such as Zubitech and a few others. But we'll talk about that more in the next video. With that being said, let's get started. But of course, if you like what it is that I do and want to support me in any other way, shape, or form other than a like and subscribe, which is always enough, links down to everything in the description below. I'd like to hit 1.5k subscribers by the end of the year. Please and thank you. Let's get started.
This is one of the most pathetic displays I've ever seen in my life. The PC Master Race has kind of exposed itself as being one of the most ignorant, the lowest, the group with the most double standards. They are the most delusional people in the gaming space. They are absolute bottom of the barrel trash.
First of all, pot kettle. If you remember my last video on the actual, video on Harman Smith, we talked about how he had very conflicting views on Doom, talking about how Doom Eternal was the worst one, but then talking about in another video how Doom itself was a garbage series, but still pointing out that it was actually ported over to the 64 or the Nintendo 64, but he said that like the original Doom was absolute garbage, but then praised like Doom 2016 for being like a great Doom game, and I'm just like, do you like it? Do you hate it? What the fuck is this? So, there's that hypocriticalness. Also, I gotta love the fact that he did the good old YouTuber clap, which is usually used for, say, syncing up audio for one reason or another. Though the fact that Harman doing any video editing in any case of this is just not a good case. He did it like one cut one time like 3 years ago. So,
See, I have my shoe here. There's some dirt on the bottom of this. That was the PC Master Race, right there. I just scraped it off. And yeah, I'm gonna clean it up later, and I'm never gonna think about it again, right? That is what I think of the PC Master Race. They aren't even worth thinking about. I step all over them every single day as a Nintendo fan, right? And they like it. They make videos complaining about me like, please, Harman, please notice me, please step on me some more. And they won't stop because they have a humiliation fetish. They love the fact that PC gaming is inferior to consoles in every way, shape, and form.
I do find this, again, very dumb, how he says this, like, oh, they have this thing that's like they love to be stepped on and they love to be proven wrong. Again, I can only really think of Projection 100 here, because Harman Smith does a lot of the same stuff. How many times has he talked about Elden Ring? How many times has he talked about... I can't think of it. Call of Duty. or something. Elden Ring is the one that he brings up the most, where he was still upset that like a Nintendo game lost out to the garbage slop from his perspective of Elden Ring. Baldur's Gate 3, that's the only other one that I can think of, where he makes they're actually great games that are loved by a lot of people, but they're not Nintendo games, so in his mind they are absolute garbage. And then he says like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to not talk about them after this video." And I suspect that in the next couple of days, or even at the time of me posting this video, he would have at least had 3 or 4 actual videos on the PC Master Race. So again, talking about hypocrisy, look in a mirror, my guy.
They get excited at the fact that they have to pay $3,000 to get a fraction of the games that come out on Nintendo Switch on their gaming PCs, right? These are people that that will willingly shell out $3,000 for a gaming PC, never use it for anything except watching porn, and then turn around and shill for the Steam Deck. Yes, after all that talk, all that bravado, all that like gaslighting, these guys spent years and years talking down to the console owners, calling them inferior. Like, I can do everything on the gaming PC. I don't need to buy a console. And what do? They go out and they hype up a console from Valve. Oh no, but it's not actually a console. It's a handheld gaming PC. That's completely different. Never mind. Never mind. It has.
Yes, it is actually. While add some value to the actual thing that a console versus a gaming handheld PC type thing, the difference is more gray than you would expect it to be, because the console experience is presented as effectively as it can be on the Steam Deck. Now, while yes, there is definitely some differences, the biggest difference being is that this thing does run on its own operating system, a custom version of Linux, at least for the Steam Deck. Now, again, for some of the other ones, it runs on places like Windows, because those ones are endorsed by it, but overall, we'll just stick with the Steam Deck for right now. And yeah, it utilizes a console-like experience, but it isn't exactly a console because it utilizes, well, the experience of a PC as well, with a full desktop as well as other things to actually modify the actual, not the, what the fuck, it doesn't modify the use cases of it, but it creates more. It's basically a laptop level PC, but in the form of a handheld, if that makes any sense.
It was just a giant cope. It always was. It was always ridiculous. It was always sad to see, right? But the thing that really gets me, now that we know for a fact that the Steam Deck and all of its direct competitors, other handheld gaming PCs, all of its competitors have sold a whopping 6 million units combined. With all their powers combined, they sold less than the Nintendo Wii U. They sold less than the Nokia N-Gage. The Nokia N-Gage has more street cred than the Steam Deck.
That is wrong, by the way. The actual numbers of the Nokia whatever the fuck he did, I did a little bit of research on this, and this was what people would refer to as the taco phone. The Nokia whatever the fuck was basically supposed to trying to do what the iPhone did, where it was trying to do what more Razer's doing, that is to create a gaming phone. A phone where you play video games on it as well as can make calls and other stuff to it. But it failed for several reasons, one of being that it was too innovative for its time and that the buttons actually didn't translate well to, a gaming pad. Go figure. But the Nokia Edge thing, whatever, actually only sold about 3-ish million, 3 to 4-ish million, which is about on par with what the Steam Deck sold, if the majority of this is to be talking about here. And if you're just talking about the Steam Deck, and the Nokia Edge talking about how one was a failure but one was not. The one that was a failure was made by a big box brand that kind of needed to, increase the sales of it in order to justify the use of the production costs. However, what Valve is doing, which is slightly different, but also, not really, but it is very different if you kind of think about it, is they are making these to order for the most part. And they don't really have a backlog that they have to sell in order to, make a profit. They make profit by the more that they sell, and when they sell it to order, that's just a different thing entirely. He'll bring this up a little bit later, and I'll talk about it more in that context, but just know that the Steam Deck not being a failure is because Valve didn't deem it as a failure. I think Valve does deem the Steam machines as a slight failure, but I would say that Valve's addition into hardware more is just learning experiences rather than actually, defining parts of the industry that are huge, because Valve doesn't necessarily do that. And again, I wouldn't necessarily call the Steam Deck a failure because it has competitors within the space. And usually when you have a small, or not really even just a small, whenever you have a new technology burst onto the scene and they're the first, they tend to be some of the best sometimes. But when your device leads to the birth of an entire industry, I would say that you actually have a success on your hands if done correctly, which Valve has done in this context. So, I don't know, dude. I would deem that a pretty big success if they can birth an entire industry and have an actual direct competitors in that PC hardware console space or whatever. Just kind of seems correct, but we move on.
And that's crazy to think about. If you look back at how people were talking about the Steam Deck when it first came out, they were telling us that Nintendo's running for the hills. They won't be able to compete with the Steam Deck's power. They're gonna all the games are coming to Steam Deck. This is the most important piece of technology since the iPhone. Quote attributed to Rich Mazzetti, of Review Tech USA. That is Masucci of Review Tech USA. What is his last name? I don't know. Well, anyway, Review Tech USA said it.
To give more context to that specific quote that he pulled, that specific quote is from Review Tech USA. If you know anything about Review Tech USA, he kind of had a roller coaster where I didn't like him, then I respected him, then I dropped respect for him, and then he basically just fell off the face of the earth, at least for me, because he got stupid high, fired his editor, and overall kind of went down the cuckoo crazy rabbit hole. So, little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, I guess. And much like getting cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, he made some very outlandish and weird claims. One being that this was this was the greatest piece of technology since the iPhone, which I think that majority of people didn't think that. And since you're only sourcing one person, and one person who was, again, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, is a little bit strange. But, moving past that, while yes, I do think that this was an important piece of technology, I don't think it was the most important one to do. It was an important piece for an interesting stepping stone to create better technology, as most technology does, but this one basically, again, birthed an entire new blue ocean industry. Because while yes, there have been handhelds in the past, and handhelds that have been very, very successful, none of them have tried to compete or try to coerce people into a different... Well, that's not true either. I would say that, again, much like how Nintendo first started onto the handheld scene and did pretty alright, I think that in this case Valve is doing the same thing, but they're fighting on a slightly different level, more towards a PC experience rather than just a straight console experience. And again, as we've probably established by now, or at least established in the past, the PC space and the console space aren't exactly one-to-one all the time. They're comparable in terms of technology, but overall, they do fight on different levels, and they're more of they're more of secondary competitors and not direct competitors, as we've kind of talked about versus marketing in the past. But again, let's continue on here to at least get halfway through this video.
Right. So the narrative was that the Steam Deck was stomping Nintendo Switch, that this was this hugely successful, popular thing, that it was this huge, huge success story, that Valve was going to be the next big thing in the space. And yet, in reality, and I was saying this even before the Steam Deck came out, there was no hope of it ever succeeding. And over the years, since this thing came out, it became very apparent to me that the Steam Deck was a complete and abject failure. I've talked about this, several times over the years. Like whenever the Steam Deck is in the news, recently it came out that Valve was actually faking their Steam charts list because when the Switch 2 was announced, the Steam Deck just completely tanked in sales, and so they had to like go into the sales bot and fix it, right? And I pointed out the fact that like if something like that is possible, right? If the sales charts can just glitch, that means that everything on Valve's bestseller list is fake. And I've been suggesting this for a long time. Is that like looking at the numbers and looking at like the narrative online, like, compared to like other games that are way more popular than them. Like I don't think Valve's numbers are real. Like Baldur's Gate 3 was not as popular as was reported by the media. Like it was not some major best-selling thing.
Oh boy, yeah. You remember what I said about Baldur's Gate 3 or Baldur's Gate 3 in this context? Yeah. Talks about it a lot. Same thing with Elden Ring. He'll probably bring that up in a little bit here. But I wanted to just let that whole bit play out because, quite honestly, even claiming this is kind of stupid for several reasons. He basically just said that, oh yeah, the bot glitched or is broken, when no one really even reported that. They just reported that the numbers dipped during this specific time when the Steam Deck 2 was announced. Even I said that earlier in the video. And yeah, they did dip in terms of traction, at least online, and if you look on places such as Google Trends and things, you'll see something very similar. When all of this evidence is corroborated together, does that mean that everyone is glitching it and everyone is against Nintendo? Fuck no. Occam's razor and all that. One of, if not the biggest things here I kind of wanted to collectively talk about is who the fuck is reporting these numbers as Valve trying to adjust the numbers or Valve trying to, fix the bots or something like that. Like, who the fuck, where is this even coming from other than outside of your own butthole that you have pulled and have just decided to spurt out onto the internet? No one was claiming that Valve was faking their numbers, and no one has any reason or right to do so, because majority of their numbers come from places such as SteamDB and the majority of cases, and those numbers are handed by actual third parties, as again, Valve doesn't need to report any sorts of findings because they're a private company. So,
But Valve helped this illusion that it was. Valve kept up this illusion that Steam Deck was popular and successful. So now that the cat is out of the bag, now that we have like some, legit analysts going in and like looking at the actual numbers and like releasing these shocking claims, people are backpedaling. Like, oh no, the Steam Deck was never supposed to compete with the Switch. It's in its own market. It's its own thing. Like, after all of that bluster, all of that coping, all of that like ranting and raving, attacking Harman Smith, all of that, like, now that the entire narrative has crumbled, now that we know the Steam Deck has failed, oh no, it wasn't ever competing with the Switch. It
wasn't ever competing with the Switch. Like, verbatim. The majority of people that were reporting this and actually critiquing you and not necessarily even complaining about you never even claimed that this was supposedly that this was any way of that. If there was any of those claims made by those people, they were kind of dumb because, again, Valve is not necessarily Nintendo. Valve does have a lot of pull within its space that it does, and it does stay within its space pretty effectively. And while, yes, it did tend to grow a bit more interesting over the time here, the main thing here that everyone, again, continues to say is that the game, or at least the console itself, wasn't meant to compete on the same level. Because, again, it's not technically the same product. It's very closely related, and in some cases is a secondary competitor to, say, the Nintendo Switch or the Nintendo consoles in and of itself. But overall, it was never meant to compete on that level, and I don't think that anyone other than maybe Rich and a couple other people were even claiming that that was going to be the case. And even if that was going to be the case, making Steam or the actual thing obsolete, for me, it actually, and then again, personally, it only made sure that I didn't end up buying a Switch. Why? Because, well, the Nintendo Switch, the only reason why I would want it would be for playing with some of the other people that I actually have a Nintendo Switch. But in the end, I decided against it because it just didn't offer me enough of the actual positives to support a lot of the negatives, including things such as paid online, which kind of turned me off pretty quickly to it. And then when this Steam Deck comes along and basically, gave me all of the options of the Nintendo Switch and more, and minus a couple of things, such as, again, Nintendo games, which I wasn't too broken up about because I could do things such as emulation, I ended up buying a Steam Deck and never decided to buy a Switch because it didn't offer enough positives to outweigh the negatives that I personally had. But that's, again, a very personal thing and really not meant to be taken any more seriously than my own personal opinion. What is meant to be taken, at least somewhat seriously, is the fact that your opinion is kind of backed up by weird anomalous logic, which, again, I don't understand how or why or in any cases anyone was covering this, saying that this was going to be bigger than the Steam Deck. Maybe one or two articles, but I can't seem to think of any off the top of my head, and even doing some minor research and Googling, again, can't really find many of it. I can find comparisons, but overall, many of those claims were a little bit outlandish to begin with. Overall, there's about 3 minutes left of this video. I don't want to cover it anymore, and I think that that'll about wrap it up because we've talked enough about Harman Smith for one day. Overall, what have we learned today? Well, apparently, there's an entire conspiracy theory about Nintendo Switch, and Harman is, again, being Harman and being the Harmanist Harman of Harman hypocrites. The man just can't shut up about anything having to do with people even remotely trying to critique Nintendo. Overall, I think that'll about do it, and be sure to stay into next time for when Icon Era decides to utilize Harman Smith as an actual insider source and defend him based on a video that was meant to be critiquing him. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. If you like what it is that I do and want to support me in any other way, shape, or form other than a like and subscribe, which is always enough, links down to everything in the description below. Maybe donate to the channel, maybe decide to hit the coffee button and give me some money down there. My next single, that is Take Me Higher or Higher or something like that, is going to be releasing sometime next month, so be on the lookout for that. I'm doing something special for this one in that I'm giving you a speed paint of the actual album cover that's going to be on it when the actual thing drops. Just kind of as like a test of some weird stuff, just to see what happens. But overall, my name is GamePango21. This microphone is starting to smell vaguely like Gamer Subs. I need to buy some more Guacamole Gamer Part 9000, and a peace. Off.